Oh, y buenas tardes, ¿cómo está? Very funny. Nosotros somos una familia. Muchas gracias. Que se haga. Just on June 4th, some of us were up early in the morning, and across our computer screens came flash word of President Obama's speech in Cairo, Egypt. I know John Bridgeland immediately moved into his social media networks and others because Barack Obama in Cairo called upon our world to enter a new era of global engagement and using interfaith dialogue and global service and building a global culture of service as a potent force in our world to bring peace and development outcomes. And on that June 4th morning, propitiously, Alan Casey, how many of you have heard of Service Nation? John will give you the tutorial in a minute. But Service Nation, were any of you there? How many were there that morning? On June 4th, they had a leadership meeting of about 200 leaders, including a number of representatives from the Pentagon. And Harris Wofford and I, Senator Wofford, were delighted to declare that Barack Obama had just announced the launch of Service World, or given us, if you will, he didn't use those words, but given us the hook or the platform, like Kennedy did 50 years ago during the campaign in Ann Arbor in Michigan, when at 2 a.m. in the morning he called on a new young generation to service. Just 3 weeks later, when Mrs. Obama announced United We Serve at the Corporation for National Service Points of Light Convention in San Francisco, Service World ramped up another notch with 3,000 activists. I submit to you today, for Cairo to effect a global tipping point that our world sorely needs, we have, I estimate, 1 year between now and this action-forcing event John will talk about in October 2010, a time period to roll up our sleeves together and generate great results. So congratulations, because you are here on the very ground floor, Partners of the Americas, Building Bridges Coalition, universities, launching something very great. We had a meeting earlier this week with every branch of the White House convened at Brookings by Strobe Talbot, and I'm pleased to announce that every sector of this administration, from State Department to the White House down to the agencies, AID, are looking at this issue because this president has declared, as presidents before him have done, that service shall be a centerpiece and hallmark of this presidency. At Brookings, we offer 4 tracks to serve you in this cause. The policy track is led by Senator Wofford and John Bridgeland. I want to introduce a woman that I call the godmother of the Global Service Fellowship legislation. There are 40 members in Congress have sponsored global service partnership legislation. It's Helen Claire Severs. If you could stand up. Helen is the founder of World Teach. She just got back from Bangladesh, right? Serving in Bangladesh. These ideas, somebody once said, great wisdom really happens out in places in the countryside in this country, and that Washington is 50 square miles surrounded by reality. Well, our great ideas here did not come from us in the ivory towers, but in places like World Teach, in the crucibles of groups like Cross Culture Solutions and Partners of the Americas. So we have a robust public policy track. We have in April a national policy summit that we're announcing for April 15th. And we have in October 2010 an action-forcing event that I think John may say a few words about. Secondly, the importance of this university gathering here today with Catherine as our leader and Eric Melinda from Duke and Gates that Melinda Gates endowed. I wish Melinda would endow a few more universities to say any kid that wants to serve abroad or at home could have support for a stipend. Well, we're going to work with you, Eric, to see if that can't be scalable. And I'd be remiss in not mentioning our university research coordinator for the Brookings Project. Amanda McBride is here. If you could stand, from Washington University. We'll hear more from Amanda tomorrow morning. Coincidentally, co-founded by a gentleman named Robert Brookings. Just a little note there. Thirdly, we have a very dynamic corporate track led by IBM and GE, their ideas of corporate service corps. And fourthly, and I think most importantly, the wind beneath the sails of this policy agenda, again, is you all in this room. Partners in Americas, Building Bridges, universities, and a coalition called Building Bridges that the illustrious Steve Rosenthal, that's really given so much of his time and effort from his own base that sends 4,000 or 5,000 volunteers a year. But each of you in this room are part of Building Bridges, part of what we're going to talk about today at Service World. And my response to that is yes, we can, and yes, we did, because I think Service World today, you're going to hear from our following speakers some very dynamic developments. And I challenge each of you in this room to be an owner of Service World, each of you to be an owner and determinant of what the President's vision is and can become, not only here in these United States, but in Latin America and Kenya, where I'll head back on Saturday, where John has been doing a lot of work in Rwanda, in Asia, and every corner of the world. So our leadership includes, for that coalition, the Kennedy nephew, Tim Shriver, whose dad founded Peace Corps. He has a favorite quote that some don't like me to repeat, but it's, "Where the hell is the peace in Peace Corps?" That was Sarge Shriver. I think it's an appropriate quote. We have Michelle Nunn, the great leader of the Points of Light Institute, where Barack Obama recently traveled down to Houston, Texas, to announce that this issue is one of the very few issues in this town of Washington that is bipartisan, that everybody agrees is in the DNA, since Tocqueville first observed it, is really in the DNA of who we are as Americans in the greater Americas here with us in the room today. Now, I'd like to introduce the co-chairman of this Service World Coalition and our efforts here in Brookings with the following presenters. And following their remarks, Steve Vetter, our senior partner in this gathering today with Partners in the Americas, will come back up and introduce the remaining panelists. First, we'll hear from John Bridgeland, who is the president and CEO of Civic Enterprises. He's a vice chairman of Malaria No More, which is, I think, the largest group of its kind mobilizing support, along with the UN Office and Commissioner on Malaria, Ray Chambers. John not only talks the talk and is a quarterback of so many of our policy efforts here in Washington, but John walks in Rwanda and other parts of the developing world, empowering and supporting these initiatives on the front line. He was the founding director of USA Freedom Corps at the White House, and many, many things behind that. But most of all, he's a friend. I've seen his daughter and him both out serving, and John has too many hats and projects to talk of, but he is a co-chairman of our policy team at Brookings and of Service World. Following John will be Senator Harris Wofford, the former senator from the great state of Pennsylvania. I don't think he's a man that needs any introduction. He is our mentor, our leader, since the John F. Kennedy era. Most importantly to some of us, he's the leading national authority on Gandhi, and I used to always ask him when I headed to Vista, give the Gandhi speech, Harris, because he reflects the soul force, the integrity. He recently got back from India with a number of Congress people on a celebration of their earlier work there. He was a founding force and architect of the Peace Corps today, and he will go back in time to say what you're doing today was so much a part of the intended vision. He was the CEO of the Corporation for National Service that launched AmeriCorps, and at any meeting that you will go to of consequence in service at home and abroad, you will find Harris Wofford. And one time we were walking back to his office. He was at the Case Foundation, and I thanked him. He says, "You don't owe me any thanks. You know, this is what I do. This is how I find meaning in life." And we have no better friend and leader than Harris Wofford. Steve Rosenthal, as I already mentioned, first of all, has one of the most dynamic international serving organizations that I've met in the world, Cross Cultural Solutions, out of New Rochelle, New York, itself sends over 4,000 volunteers abroad. Now, when we want to talk about multilateral service, the Americas, Africa, Asia, working more on an equal footing, you need to visit CCS, because his office is a multilateral headquarters from people around the world. Harris and I, forgive me, I got to tell one other quick Harris story. I went to your headquarters in Thailand, right, and I went up the river to a women's co-op, and what was it, an orchid farm? I go out on the lily pads, and I go back, and there's this little book on a little outpost with an inscription by Harris Wofford saying that he wants to do a Buddhist monkship. So we want to accept him today as also the monk of this movement. And so Steve, forgive me, but he is our leader in the Building Bridges Coalition as chairman. Without further ado, please welcome our leader, John Bridgeland. Thank you.